Hi there. We are now live on Facebook. How is everyone?
Good, thanks.
Very good, thanks.
Great. We've got a few people joining us already. So hi there to Lucy and hi there to Lindsay and Ian. We'll let you join and we'll get started in just a few minutes. First of all, I guess we introduce ourselves. So hi there, I'm Lexi.
I'm Sarah, hello.
I'm Jill, hi.
And I'm Rubia, hello everyone. So today we've decided to talk about some of our high altitude trips, and we're lucky enough to have Lexi with us, who's our most experienced when it comes to high altitudes. So we're just going to have a bit of a chat. And so Lexi, what was your first trip and how did you cope?
That's a really good question. When I was thinking about this, I realised that my first high altitude trip wasn't the one that I would think of. Oh, some strange noise going on in the background. Sorry about that. I think it's my next door neighbours.
It might be me.
So
noisy out there today.
No worries. Hi there, Liv and Alan and David. Nice to see you here. So I'll just start that again. So the first time I went to altitude, I didn't even realise I was at altitude. So it was a volcano in Kenya actually that I trekked first. I've got a picture of it I'm going to show you here. Just pop that up on my screen. So this is Mount Longonot, which is in the Rift Valley of Kenya, and it's a volcano which is 2,776 meters high, and technically high altitude is anything above 2,500 meters. So that was my first experience at altitude, and like I said, I didn't even realize it was high altitude at the time. I was just told, we're going to go out for a walk today, we're going to climb a volcano, isn't that fun? And then it was only later that I realized it was a high altitude trip. So I didn't notice anything at all at that particular level. But the next one, and probably one which more people would recognize as a high altitude experience, was Kilimanjaro. And that one is, of course, definitely a high altitude experience. You can see the picture there. You're talking about a massive mountain, almost 6,000 meters high. And I did that in 2008 was the first time that I climbed that mountain. An absolutely amazing experience. You asked, how did I cope? That's a really great question. I think one of the things that I could say is that I went into it without any expectations. So had just the thought of just trying to get through every day and taking it as it came. But equally, it was a challenge. It was the highest hill I'd ever climbed. It was certainly the first time I'd been at extreme altitude like that. I can remember on the summit night having a packet of, it was powdered glucose that I had in my pocket, and I just remember taking this cardboard container and tipping it into my mouth as we were going up to the summit, just to try and kind of get some energy to get going. And it was an experience I'd never had before. It was very, very strange. It felt very difficult, of course, and psychologically it was kind of a case of having to make yourself continue and take one step at a time. I did manage to make it to the summit. Just sharing a picture there for you, everyone. It was a feeling of elation getting to the top, elation and relief as well. One of the things I think you will discover as you journey into the high altitude experience is that when you have your picture taken at the summit, you expect that you're going to be looking like a hardcore adventurer and looking really strong and amazing, but every single one of my summit pictures, there's something odd going on. So I don't know if you can see in that picture there, I'm just going to put my mouse over it. That's me in the middle there, and my hat is basically falling off my head at that point. I had no idea it was basically off my head, and I look a little bit silly. I'm pulling a funny face, but at the time, you're so happy. All you want to do is just enjoy that moment and really kind of take it all in. So don't be expecting any good summit pictures, because they just don't happen at altitude.
Well, what does it actually feel like? Both, I guess the elation of reaching the summit, but the journey of getting there.
Well, it varies from trek to trek and also from person to person as well. Typically, the way I would describe it is it just feels like everything is a little bit harder than it should be. So if you took, let's say, the Everest Base Camp trek and you put that at sea level, the actual trekking might not be considered particularly difficult because the terrain is gentle for most parts. Of course, there's plenty of hills in there as well, but it's more that feeling of it's like you're walking through treacle sometimes. Every footstep just takes that little bit more effort. There's various different kind of physiological things that happen to you when you're ascending to higher altitudes. So you potentially got headaches and perhaps a little bit of nausea and things like that. So there's different feelings physiologically and also psychologically. Like I mentioned before, it's so important that you have that drive to succeed and push yourself forwards and really kind of dig deep when it gets tough. So there's lots of different ways of thinking about how it feels, but physiologically it's tough. It's really hard. And I mean, Sarah, you've been to altitude as well. How did you experience it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it was probably more the physical side that I struggled with. Just it's harder to sleep. You lose your appetite, which for me was amazing because I never lose my appetite. But you obviously need to keep your energy intake up, and I think I just really struggled with that side of it as well. So yeah, it was and for me, I think it was that physical side probably more than the mental side, but very strange feeling.
Yeah, and again, Ruby, you've also been to an area of high altitude. How did you experience it?
Yeah, I think for me it was you really feel the breathing as soon as you step off that plane in Lukla. It's like, oh, hang on, I'm struggling to not struggling to take breath, but the air just feels really heavy, and like you say, it's just the effort of what would normally be fine. Everything just takes that little bit more effort, and you feel it. And I was the opposite. At the end of the night, I crashed out completely. I was just straight to bed. Best night's sleep. Once I was in the sleeping bag, I was completely zonked. But I think, like you say, it affects different people in different ways. But for me, it was just the extra effort. And I was lucky enough to be in Nepal for a week on a building site working. So we weren't as high up, but we kind of got a little bit more acclimatized to being there. And I was there with people who live on an island, so they're on sea level. So I think they felt it a bit more than I did.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I'm just going to share a couple of pictures here that I've taken on a few trips, which I think kind of represents the feelings that you go through during the trip. Now, warning, these are not pretty pictures, so so just bear that in mind. So I'm just sharing a picture here. This is a selfie that I took whilst I was in a mountain hut on Mount Elbrus, the highest peak in Europe. And you can see in this picture, I don't look very happy at all. It was freezing cold. I was snuggled up in my sleeping bag, trying to get some sleep. Couldn't sleep at all. I was awake most of the night and just physically exhausted from really, really tough trekking throughout the days. Another one I'm going to share with you is another horrendous selfie. I'm not ashamed to share these. This is a selfie that I took on Aconcagua, the highest peak in South America. This was just after I'd come back down from the summit and was taking a rest break and wanted to kind of capture the moment of excitement and being thrilled about being there. But as you can see, I have a dreadfully puffy face, can't smile, and my sunglasses are almost falling off. It's quite a look that I've got going on there. But then probably my favorite one, and I think the reason that despite these kind of dreadful, scary looking pictures, why we keep going back is something like this one. So this is the summit of Kilimanjaro a couple of years ago, and like I mentioned at the beginning, that feeling of elation that you get when you are there. You've reached that summit, you have achieved your goal, and it's sort of downhill from there in the best way possible. That's the kind of thing that keeps you going and makes you really want to celebrate that moment. Let me just.
So Lexi, I'm going to ask you, as the only one in this team who's definitely not racing to climb a mountain, how safe is it?
Well, that's a really important question and something that a lot of people ask. And I would say that it's as safe as you are sensible. So obviously, being an area of high altitude, you're at a position where your body is going to suffer. You're not used to being in that kind of an environment. So as long as you take the necessary precautions and are sensible, and above all else, listen to your experienced guides, then it's as safe as it can be. That said, altitude sickness is a real thing. It's a serious issue and something that needs to be taken seriously. When you are at sea level, you've got lots of nice high pressure that helps the oxygen kind of fill your blood, with lovely rich oxygen-rich cells. But when you're at high altitude, the pressure is much less, and so for every breath you take, less oxygen comes in. So you're talking about, quite serious risk to your health if you're not sensible. And that's why, certainly for us as a company, we make sure that all of the trips that we do, the acclimatization process is top priority. We make sure that there's a nice slow and gradual ascent, so you have not only the best chance of making it to the summit, but also to make sure that you are adjusting as well as you possibly can be. Like I say, it's about being sensible, about listening to your guides and listening to your body, being honest about how you're feeling, and keeping sensible.
Who does it generally affect?
Unfortunately, there's no specific rhyme or reason as to who it affects, so it can affect anyone and everyone. Even people that are well adjusted to the altitude can suffer from altitude sickness at any point. Some people are just kind of more susceptible to symptoms at higher altitudes. Some people just thrive in high altitudes, so it really varies, and it's not consistent as well. So it might be that you've gone to a high altitude area for 10, 20, 50 times, and then on the 51st time you get altitude sickness. So it's very variable. I had a question asked about asthma and how that affects people. Now, whilst I'm not a medical professional, I did check the Asthma UK website to find out kind of the answer to that. And essentially, people fare differently. Those that suffer from asthma fare differently depending on the triggers of the asthma that you have. So quite a lot of the time, people find that at higher altitudes, where there's less pollutants, contaminants and pollen and things like that, their asthma is actually much better and they cope much better. But equally, some people have triggers such as cold and exercise, so that can make your asthma worse. So like I said, I'm not a doctor, so if you do suffer from asthma, then please do speak to your GP about that. But it varies from person to person, so it's not easy to give a kind of one fits all answer. Yeah.
So how did you find, in your experience, how do different people cope with those effects?
Again, it's kind of about being honest and making sure that people are able to talk about their feelings and their kind of their effects and things. I think one of the things that's very common is that people get frightened because they're experiencing things which they're not used to, and it feels very different to what they're expecting. So like you mentioned, Rubia, about when you land in Lukla and all of a sudden it's, oh, that's funny, I can't really breathe properly. That's quite a frightening thing, especially if you're someone that's fit and healthy and you've trained really well, and all of a sudden you kind of feel like you're 100 years old and trying to walk up the stairs. And that's something, in fact, that's very common when people visit Cuzco in Peru ahead of the Machu Picchu trek. When you land there, the altitude is about 3,400 meters, so you're coming from sea level, essentially from Lima, arriving into Cuzco 3,500 meters higher. And I'll never forget just that first time walking up the stairs in the hotel with your bags and thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here. I can't have trained enough. It was so hard. And Sari, I mean, you've done that trek as well. How did you feel when you were there in Cuzco?
Yeah, you're right. It's just when you first get into Cuzco that first day, and you just feel everything hits you at once, because you suddenly go, I don't think there's anything else we do where you suddenly go into that high an altitude from sea level. And you just feel like you can't walk. You think, how on earth am I going to do a 4 or 5 day trek when I can't even walk up the stairs to my bedroom? yeah, it's quite a strange feeling, but you do adapt, and that's why we do always spend at least 2 or 3 days there at that altitude before we start trekking. And after that time, actually, you've adjusted to it, your body's more in tune with it, and 99% of people from then on have adapted and coped okay. But yeah, that first minute hits you, it's, yeah, quite bizarre.
Absolutely. I've got a couple more photos to share with you about how people cope, and I think, again, you know, a picture says 1,000 words, so I'm just going to share this one with you. So I've got a couple of pictures here from Everest Base Camp Trek, and if you just have a look there at the variety of different responses there. So we've got a couple of people with their heads on their hands, and we've got a couple of smiley faces there. And then the next one, again, you can see some extremely exhausted people and one very, very smiley face. That is a very kind of typical example of how it affects different people and how different people cope with that kind of altitude exposure and the exhaustion that comes with it. It really is, it's very variable.
And how do you guys as tour managers and the local guides deal with that? How do you manage those situations?
I think that the most important thing that we do is monitoring people from the beginning. So most of the trips that we do, before you reach an area of high altitude, you have, you know, a day or so of, you know, settling in and getting used to things. So at that point, you can kind of just about figure out people's normal. So that's, you know, obviously bearing in mind travel fatigue and adjusting to a different country, different climate, potentially different food and things. But you get that idea, first of all, of how people are managing. And then as you progress slowly, you know, in altitude, you constantly are taking notes, mental notes about how people are doing, seeing how their personality changes, because, you know, there's lots of different effects that can come to, you know, affect your demeanor, especially if you've not had a good night's sleep. You might find that people are a little bit more grumpy in the mornings, and just keeping an eye on things. And then, you know, if we're concerned, then there's lots of different things that we can do to kind of test, you know, people's acclimatization levels, whether that's sort of pulse oximeters or the Lake Louise score. There's lots of different things that we can do to make sure that we're keeping really, really close eye on people, that they're happy and safe above all else.
What does happen if somebody gets sick?
Essentially, the cure for altitude sickness is descent. So what we would do is to get someone down as quickly as we possibly could. I'll just share a picture here of one of the methods that's used on Kilimanjaro to get people down quickly. Essentially, it's a stretcher on a bike wheel with some very dodgy suspension. It's a quick way of getting people down on the trails. Pop them in there, kind of get them situated, get them secure, and essentially the porters will run them down the mountain as quickly as they can on this stretcher. Obviously, different countries have different ways of sort of helping people with the descent. So, for example, in Peru, on the Machu Picchu trek, there'd be horses, emergency horses that you can ride out to the nearest roadhead before taking a vehicle to you know, the lower altitude areas. On Everest Base Camp, if there's a serious incident, then of course there's helicopter rescue. It really depends on the situation, the severity, and, you know, the country that you're in. But essentially, like I said, the most important thing is descent, and it's always important that people respect that decision. It's a very, very hard decision for us to have to make. Telling people that, you know, they have to leave their dream trip is heartbreaking, honestly. But at the end of the day, it's more important that you're safe and healthy, and, you know, keeping yourself looked after at all times.
So we've kind of touched on a few of the not so nice side of things there, but what do you particularly enjoy about high altitude trekking? Because I know you are so passionate about it. What is it that, you know, really you love about it?
There's so many things. I would say my top favorite thing would be that at high altitude, you have to walk slowly. Thumbs up to everyone. Thumbs up on Facebook if you also like walking slowly. It's one of those things that you know, day to day, I am a fast walker, so kind of out and about, I'll be walking sort of 4 miles an hour or something. And when you're trekking at high altitude, you have to walk slowly in order to acclimatize, and there's just something very enjoyable about just plodding along step by step. So that's one of the things that I really, really enjoy. Another thing is something that you touched on a little bit, Sarah, was about you know, eating and food and things. You mentioned that at high altitude, you lose your appetite, and that's a very, very common thing that people experience. I'm a bit of an odd one in that my appetite increases quite significantly at altitude. So one of the things that I really enjoy is eating all of the leftovers that people can't eat. And always having room for a second portion. I'm going to just share a picture here with everyone watching of one of the meals that I had 3 servings of when I was in Aconcagua. This is a steak with an avocado, egg, and tomato salad. So I had 3 servings of that, which was absolutely spectacular. So yeah, certainly eating plenty, having the opportunity to snack constantly, that's a really, really great thing. I love being able to do that all the time. And also having the opportunity to see things that you wouldn't necessarily see anywhere else in the world. So the picture that I'm sharing now is showing the shadow of the mountain in the background that I'm going to be summiting. And there's just something extremely special about being in a place where no one else is. And it's that feeling of being really, really away from the hustle and bustle of life, and you know, getting that opportunity to just escape from things, and all you have to focus on is putting one foot in front of the other and just step by step, really slowly, all the way to the summit and back again. For me, that's just, it's so inspiring, and it's really just a very peaceful experience. And like I say, some of the things that you get to see are just spectacular. So I'll just show you another picture here. This is taken from Kala Patthar, which is one of the peaks near Everest Base Camp. And you climb up that in the nighttime and wait for the sunrise. And that photograph that I'm showing, it's not a black and white photograph that I've edited. This is a color photograph, and the red halo that you can see around the mountain in the background, that's Everest itself. And there's something just magical about having the opportunity to see something that no one else is seeing in the world, apart from your teammates around you, and just being absorbed in that moment and seeing some of nature's most beautiful landscapes and scenes. So yeah, that would definitely be my top things: walking slowly, seeing great things, and eating loads of food.
So what's been your absolute best experience so far?
Oh wow, there's been so many. It would be really, really difficult to choose. I would say Kilimanjaro is always going to be my favorite. Africa is in my heart, and it is a mountain that I just adore. There's just such wonderful feelings and memories, and the support team, you know, the porters and the guides and the cooks are just spectacular. So I would say that would be my favorite trip of all. But within that, there's been so many amazing memories and so many special experiences. So for example, watching other people going through a journey whilst they're on the mountain, for me, is one of the reasons that I keep going back and why I love doing my job. Seeing how they start off in this kind of a little bit cautious, a little bit unsure, and then they develop themselves as they're going through the mountain and they reach the summit, and it's that feeling of achievement, and it's just so rewarding watching that. You know, it's a really, really special thing to see. And to be part of a team all going for the same goal, being there as, you know, one of a great deal of people that are, you know, wanting to, you know, set out to achieve the same thing. There's something very special about that, and all being very like-minded. There's nothing like that. And as far as kind of personal favourite moments, one of my most favourite moments ever. It's a really small moment, but it just, there's something about it at that particular time. I was just coming down from the summit of Aconcagua, and we stopped for a quick drink break, and the clouds had been coming in. There was a snowstorm just about to come in, and as we stopped there for a break, the sun had been rising and the clouds were really, really dense above us, and the clouds just parted just a little bit, and this amazing literal silver lining just lined the clouds above me. And I've never ever seen anything so beautiful like that before, and it was that kind of moment of I've just achieved one of my lifelong dreams. I have, I'm on my way down. The snowstorm hasn't hit yet, so that's great. And there's this just beautiful clouds with this stunning silver lining. It was magical, and it's those kind of moments that, although it's not, summiting the mountain, that's probably my most favorite experience of that entire trip. It was seeing those clouds. So yeah.
Imagine that must really just stay with you.
It really does.
Yeah. So on a practical point of view, is there anything when you're preparing and packing for these trips, anything you take with you that you don't on a sort of a more regular lower altitude trek? Anything that you need to plan ahead of?
To be honest, it's not so much that you bring different things, it's just that things have different purposes. So for example, you would perhaps normally bring a waterproof jacket with you when you're out trekking, because you'll be expecting rain, but quite often on a high altitude trip it wouldn't be rain, it would be snow that you'd be expecting, or high winds. So using equipment differently is probably more accurate. Although kind of touching back onto the snacks thing, of course it's important to bring lots and lots of snacks with you, things that you really enjoy eating. So yeah, I typically like to bring lots of cheese with me on the mountains, and that seems to power me through. And of course, making sure you've got good warm layers as well. The things that you bring with you have to be really functional and lightweight. It's got to be something that potentially is going to keep you warm, but weigh half as much as something you might wear on a normal trek. So you've got to be considerate about the type of things that you're packing. But it does depend so much on the actual trip. For example, our Machu Picchu trek, you go from kind of wet, damp conditions for the first day to very, very cold, sub-zero temperatures on the second day, and then up to sort of 25 degrees on the last couple of days. So it's a real variable thing. So yeah, when it comes to what to take and what to pack, then do refer to the kit list and ask questions to find out what it is that you need, and you'll get the right idea. Is there anything particular, Sarah, that you enjoy taking with you on high altitude treks?
I think you're right. I mean, snacks. It's very themed, doesn't it, in our conversations? But yeah. Taking snacks that you really can face eating, because as I said previously, for me certainly I did lose my appetite, and pretty much I think for about a week on Everest Base Camp all I ate was popcorn and Pringles, because I just really could not face anything that wasn't just dry, plain, salty. It's so not me, for anyone that knows me. But other than that, yeah, you're right, just having the right equipment, because the last thing you want to be worrying about when you've got everything else that you've got to cope with, you're just focusing on the here and now of you being there, and as you say, step by step going up that mountain. You don't want to be worried about, am I going to get wet, am I going to get cold? You just need to know that you've got the right things with you. I guess one thing that you would need is, because of the altitude you're at, and therefore the sun exposure and the glare, you do need good factor sun cream and really good wraparound sunglasses. They're two things that are really important, per se, not as important on other treks.
And certainly another thing as well I've just thought of, you just reminded me, having tissues in every single pocket is very, very useful. If you have a runny nose, which you tend to do when you're walking anyway, your nose starts running at the beginning of the day. If you're heading up to the summit and your nose starts running, you might not notice it because it's cold, and then what you might end up with is essentially frozen snot on your upper lip, which, trust me, is not very comfortable, and it's not very attractive either. So having tissues in every single pocket, so no matter which pocket you put your hand into, you'll find one, is very, very useful. Otherwise you end up with very snotty gloves instead, which is fine. All of this kind of stuff is fine at altitude.
So Lexi, tell me, what are your plans for any future high altitude treks? Have you got any bucket list mountains?
Oh, that's a very, very difficult question, Jill.
I knew it would be.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm really excited about the rest of this year. So travel permitting, I'll be heading off to Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya, and also Machu Picchu. So I'm really, really excited about doing those trips later on for 3 amazing charities, St Oswald's Hospice, Born Free, and ActionAid. So those I'm very much looking forward to, all being well with travel restrictions. As for my own kind of bucket list goals, I do have one that I really would love to do. It's high mountain in the Himalaya called Cho Oyu, and it's 8,201 meters, the sixth highest mountain on the planet. It's nicknamed the Turquoise Goddess and is one of the most beautiful peaks I've ever seen. And I just fancy that one. I think that would be a nice one to aim for. I'm not quite skilled enough at this point, so there'll be things I'll need to do in between now and then to achieve that. But that's part of the fun of being in the mountains. It's not just about your ultimate goal, it's about the training that you do leading up to it, and having the opportunity to experience all of the things before you reach your ultimate goal.
Excellent.
How about you guys? Have you got any particular goals or ideas about high altitude trekking?
That's a simple answer from me.
I think for me that I don't have any particular goals in mind, but I do love being up in the mountains, trekking at not necessarily the extreme altitudes that you go for, Lexi, but there is just something lovely about being up there surrounded by all of these peaks. Once you sort of get to like even 3,000 meters or so, you are just up in a different zone almost. The light's clearer, everything's brighter, and I just enjoy that experience wherever it is. So yeah.
You're quite a keen skier as well, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely, and you go to fairly high altitudes, even in Europe, skiing well above 3,000, 3,500 meters. So just that feeling you get when you're there, and then hurtling back down again, obviously, is the reward. But yeah, there's something special about being up in that, as you say, that sort of like clean, fresh, special space, I guess.
Mm. Yeah. Ruby, what about you?
I was just going to say, I was lucky enough to fly over Everest, and I must say I was absolutely moved by the magic of it, even from the window of an aeroplane.
Mm-hmm.
There was something totally haunting about it. But I'll stay in the plane rather than...
How about you, Ruby? Are you planning on heading back to altitude anytime soon?
I'd love to be able to complete Everest Base Camp one day, having had to stop halfway through. But for me, the bucket list, Machu Picchu's been at the top of the bucket list for so long. So yeah, that's definitely one I want to cross off sometime soon. So yeah, we'll see.
Amazing.
So what would you say are your top tips to anyone thinking about getting up there?
I would say training would be the first thing. So although there's nothing you can do specifically to prepare for altitude, being fit and healthy and prepared is definitely the number one tip. So making sure that regardless of the altitude, your athletic fitness is as good as it can be. That would be my number one. When you're dealing with an experience like we've described about, feeling like everything is a lot harder than it is at sea level, if you also have subpar fitness as well as that, then it's just going to make life more difficult. And of course you can push through it. Having that kind of psychological mental strength to push through it, that's fine, but you won't enjoy it as much. And it is so enjoyable. You want to make sure that you have the opportunity to get everything you can out of it and enjoy every single moment without kind of huffing and puffing your way up the mountain. So training would be one thing. Being organized and prepared is another. So knowing where what your kit does, how it works for you, where things are. So in your backpack, know where your snacks are, know where your toilet paper is, and making sure that you're organized all the way through the trip, so that again it's something that's just an autopilot thing. Like Sarah mentioned before about you don't have to be thinking about keeping dry and keeping safe, you just want to be able to enjoy it. So yeah, being organized would also be a top tip.
Wonderful.
Oh, go on. Oh, I think you might have frozen. Sorry. So I think that was.
Did I freeze then? Sorry.
You did a little bit.
I don't know when I cut out there, but have we got any questions come in? Lexi?
We've had a couple of questions in, one about the training side of things. So Alan has asked, is it essential to train for altitude trips? Which I just touched on just a moment ago. And of course, yes, it is essential. Like I say, it's not just about achieving the altitude, sort of overcoming the altitude. It's about you are going to be climbing up a mountain potentially, and that tends to be uphill all the way up and downhill all the way down. In fact, that's something else that's important to do, is to train for the downhills as well. Don't just train for the uphills, because the downhill can be just as tiring as the uphills. Do any of you guys have any kind of other tips that we could add to this?
I think for me, it's keeping an eye on people around you as well. You might notice something that they won't necessarily notice when you're at altitude. And I think it's just the camaraderie of being in a group and keeping an eye on everyone. You might notice slight nuances, like you say, in mood, or someone might not be feeling so well. But definitely the group camaraderie is very important when you're up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think everyone, everyone is generally in a team, sort of helping, supporting each other. Yes, the guides and obviously our tour managers are very much there to take the lead and sort of ultimately make any decisions if somebody does sadly have to go back to a lower altitude or what have you. But on the whole, just that being part of a team, everyone supports each other, looks after each other is a really nice aspect of it.
Completely. I think I'm just seeing how long we've been talking. I apologise for talking so long. I think we'll wrap up here. But just a kind of quick couple of things just to mention at the end is, don't be fearful about signing up for a trip if you don't think that you're currently fit for it. So there is plenty of time for you to prepare. So for example, we've got trips coming up next year to Everest Base Camp and Kilimanjaro, and they are towards the sort of spring and summer of next year. So there's plenty of time for you to prepare and train for it. The key thing is just to start as soon as you can and get going. In fact, just a small plug here, we are running a special offer at the moment, so you can book on any of our 2021 open challenges for just £95 deposit at this point, and the rest of the deposit can be paid by the end of August. So if you fancy joining us on one of our amazing treks, then please do head over to our website, different-travel.com, and have a look at the different adventures that you can join us and sign up for today for just £95. So with that, thank you so much to everyone for joining us on Facebook. Thank you to you guys for tricking me with all of these difficult questions. And it was lovely to speak to you all. And we'll see you next week at 11 o'clock for our next Facebook Live. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.